Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of HBO's Mare of Easttown. Tonight, we're discussing episode 3, which was titled Enter Number 2. And look, after this episode, I have 5 different new suspects that could be attached to the death of Erin, and we're going to break it all down, all in this spoiler review. But before we do so, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. If you're new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new reviews like this. It would mean a lot to me if you all can like and share this review. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate all the support. And in those comments, I cover shows like this, Defending Jacob, Perry Mason, The Undoing, to not just because I love crime thrillers, but I love interacting with you all. I love reading your comments, your thoughts, your theories. So go ahead and light up the comments now. Your thoughts on episode 3, your pros, your cons. What do we think about Mare and her moral compass in this episode? Siobhan, we're going to really talk about Siobhan in this episode, and of course, Deacon Mark, and can't forget about Richard, can't forget about Frank, and so much more. So let me know your suspects, let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. So just my general take on this third episode. I said it last week, this is my cup of tea. This is the type of show that gets me hooked in the conversation and the theories and who done it, but also I appreciate all that, but like I said last week, it's the character moments. It's this small town vibe of everyone knowing everybody, knowing their dirty secrets, knowing that they want to protect certain people and covering things up. It's all that stuff that just makes this so intriguing. And then you add in the great writing, the great cinematography, the direction, the acting, of course. This show is just clicking on all cylinders for me, and I really enjoyed this episode. And listen, I have quite a few notes to go over in this review, so I'm going to go ahead and leave time codes and description in the description box so you can kind of know what topics we'll be covering, because again, I really want to focus on Siobhan, I want to focus on Deacon Mark, and I also want to focus on Mare in this episode, and so many other nuances and other little things that we break down, little, I don't want to say Easter eggs, but little details that I really caught in this episode. So again, I thought this episode was fantastic, and yeah, we have a lot to discuss in this breakdown, so go ahead, sit down, relax, and let's have a discussion about this third episode. So as we jump into this recap, the episode opens up with Mare, with her grandson, Drew, and we see her looking at Drew, and it appears to me that I'm assuming a couple things are going on in her mind. She loves her grandson, and this is kind of like a second opportunity to be a better grandmother than she was a mother. And we'll talk about that scene a little bit later when she talks about Colin and her not being a good mom. So I think she's like, I would do whatever it takes to protect my grandson. And then also I'm thinking in her head that this is her saying, what if Drew has the same, disorders and the, all the stuff, the tics and ultimately the depression, what maybe potentially theorizing what led to Kevin taking his own death. So there's a lot of things that I was kind of thinking in that moment, but it's also something I want to bring up, and I'm going to talk about Siobhan a lot in this review. It was interesting that Siobhan was in the room, and a lot of the time the camera would pan to Siobhan, and a lot of the reveals will go to Siobhan. I didn't mention last week, but where was she last week when Mare was trying to contact her all morning long? She was missing all day. We're going to talk about Siobhan a lot in this episode, but going back into the recap here, as I want to focus on a little details here. So as you guys noticed from that first moment, that first opening scene, we cut to this panning shot of the streets. And I don't know if you all, again, this might just be, I might be stretching here, I might be reaching here, but you notice that they showed that sign that says, watch children. To me, that's like a double entendre, right? A double meaning, watch the children, because obviously in this last year, there's been a missing girl. There's been a girl that's been recently killed. So obviously, watch your children, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure that no one else loses their life due to this predator, this killer out there. But also the other meaning, watch your children, maybe a child or a teenager in this case, Siobhan, or someone else may have been responsible for not necessarily the kidnapping and maybe the potential murder of Katie, but also the killing of Erin. So I don't know. I might be stretching there in regards to that watchy or the watch the children sign that the camera like really kind of emphasized on. So again, I love these type of shows to dive into these little details there. But again, I might just be totally stretching on that one. But let's go into some really good, interesting facts here. We learn about Erin's death, and we learned that her death took place between the times of 12 a.m. and 2 a.m., and there was no evidence of sexual assault on Erin, but more details regarding her wounds and the consistency with the wounds that were found on her body, matching the same wounds that was found when she got into that interaction, or that fight, I should say, with Brianna. So we also learned that her finger is missing, and we'll get to that scene a little bit later regarding her finger missing due to the bullet and the ricocheting of the bullet. We'll get into that kind of Sherlock Holmes moments, which I really enjoyed. But going to Kenny, we cut to him as we see him laying in the exact same spot his daughter was found as his cousins come to find him, and he tells them, I got him, I killed that SOB. And we'll get to him and Kenny and him still being someone to keep an eye out for. Cut to Mare, and we see Colin, her coming to the conclusion that she wasn't killed in the woods, but instead she was killed somewhere else, which would explain her bike missing. And now they get the call about Kenny, who actually turns himself in. So let's break down this scene. As we see them talking to Kenny, he turns himself in, he explains what happened, and as I had predicted last week, as you all can see in this clip here, I don't think he's dead, but he is probably unconscious. He's probably shot in the leg or something, but I don't think that Dylan is dead, because I think they're going to continue to go off that thread in regards to now that Kenny shot him, he's going to probably be in jail and all this stuff, but I don't think that kid is dead yet, but who knows. So Dylan isn't dead, and that's why I said that last week, because I feel like it would have been more interesting if they would have left him alive versus just killing off that character, because that kind of kills off that storyline. So I like that the show kept him alive, which we cut into seeing Dylan and his parents learning about the damage of his gunshot wounds, and it appears that he might have some, he might not be able to walk, but we'll talk about his, him being able to walk later in this episode. But we cut, but also before I even go forward, it's interesting to note that someone found Dylan's body in the woods and was responsible for calling the 911, or maybe they took him to the hospital themselves. Who was that person that found Dylan? I don't know if they mentioned it or not. Let me know your thoughts in the comments there. But going into this flashback sequence here, again, this episode really focuses on Siobhan, and I'm keeping my eye on Siobhan. But nonetheless, we see this flashback of her recording Kevin and Carrie, and she's just having fun with her brother and his girlfriend, or I should say at that time, the mother of his child. But it appears that she's doing this type of project for school revolving around her brother's disorder, and we'll get back to that project a little bit later. But cut to a scene in which we see Mare cutting Drew's nails. Now, the word I use here, we see Siobhan yet again in a scene distracting Drew. I emphasize the word distraction with Siobhan. I'll get to that a little bit later, but she's cutting his nails, and we see little Drew say, hey, Nana, my other Nana, I don't know, it'll be his great-grandmother, right? Helen says that, I might be living with my mom permanently, which obviously sets some tension in that house. But a small detail, we see Siobhan says, I'm going to leave to go to my dad's house. Obviously, we'll get to that scene, but distraction, Siobhan, Frank, going to dad's house. Was she missing last week to help her dad cover something up? This episode really focuses on people covering up for others. Mare, Chief Carter, we'll get to that. But nonetheless, we cut to a pretty intense scene between Helen and her daughter Mare as they discuss everything with Drew and him going to live with the mom, and why would Helen put that in that little boy's head and all that stuff. But nonetheless, this was the moment I was waiting for. Her best friend Lori appears, and she wants to talk to Mare. So I'm like, okay, how is Mare going to react to this news of Frank and his involvement with Erin? But cut to this scene here as we see, Lori telling Mare about Jess, and Jess saying that she doesn't believe that Dylan is the real father, and that Jess told her that she believes Frank's the father, and that she saw Frank over Erin's house and hanging out with her and bringing her baby supplies. And it's important to note Mare's reaction in this moment, because she says, Frank, my Frank? I don't know. We know Mare can cover up some things in this episode, whether it's deleting footage, whether it's planting evidence on someone. I don't know if Mare was maybe pretending or acting in that moment like, my Frank is involved with Erin. I don't know. Let's talk about that in the comments. But nonetheless, her reaction, she sold it pretty well as she goes over to Frank's house. She comes in, it appears to be like family game night. We see Mare goes in and say, hey, I want to talk to you real quick. And we see Frank's like, hey, I'm busy. We can talk tomorrow. And she just flats out. She's like, you know what? Cut the BS. You lied about Erin, and I know you lied. And then we see Frank. He says, okay, I'll go ahead and talk to you now since you put all my stuff out there in front of company. We see this scene take place in regards to them having this discussion. Frank immediately admits that, yes, he knew her. He knew her more than he alluded to last week, that he did provide her with, baby supplies eyes and someone to talk to, and he says that he felt bad for her, and he did this immediately after the death of his son, so he almost kind of wanted to help someone else out in regards to someone having a child. He just lost his child. So sure, Frank, it sounds good, but it's also important to notice that Siobhan makes her way into this scene. Again, I'm liking this Siobhan character. I'm loving all the red herrings, but we're going to get to Siobhan here in a bit, because I don't know if you all notice the posture of not only Siobhan, but also Faye, Frank's fiance, when the word comes out that you are potentially the child of Erin, that you may be a suspect in her death. Seeing Siobhan's face and also Faye's face, it almost looked like they were both kind of like, they weren't shocked. I don't know if it's just me, and we're seeing Siobhan obviously stick up for her dad, like, oh, what the F, mom, you did blah, blah, blah. But I was looking at their face, and again, Faye seems to know something a little bit more than what she's alluding to, and also Siobhan protecting her dad in this instance. So I'm going to get to something a little bit later as far as my suspect list in the end of this review, but I just want to point those two characters out in their reaction to this big news of their father, as well as this new husband of Faye potentially being not only the father of this child, but also being the murderer in this case. So really important to note that there, as we kind of cut to Frank saying that he'll be willing to take the paternity test, and he's also willing to talk about their dead son, because we obviously know Mare's kind of suppressed that and really hasn't been talking about that. But again, I want to note that when the camera pans out after this intense moment, we cut to Siobhan, but we also cut to Faye. So let's keep an eye on those two characters. But cut to Mare talking to Dylan's parents as they want to talk about the interactions that they had with Erin in regards to Erin being a good mother according to Dylan's mom and all that good stuff. But more importantly, they bring up Dylan paternity test. Will he be willing to do it? And will they be willing to help out in this case? Cut to seeing Colin talking to Frank about his whereabouts the night before, which line up to the alibi we get with John a little bit later around 2:30 that they were out and he took, Frank home, which we might be able to put Frank off to the side a little bit, but there's something still he might not be the killer, but in regards to the father of Erin's dad, or being the dad of Erin's child, that might be true. But nonetheless, he has an alibi. He talks about to Colin, I didn't kill her, and I'm sure not, I'm definitely not the father. We'll see about that latter half. But nonetheless, we see he agrees to take that test. So I'm excited to learn the test results, hopefully in next week's episode. But we see that Mare arrives, and Chief Carter tells her, Frank's here, Frey's here, and he warns her and all that good stuff. But we see, Frey gets helloed by Mare. She has no words for her, and we see Frank and Frey seem to not be on talking terms. Again, Frey knows more than what she's alluding to, guys. She might know about Frank and his doings with someone else in regards to Erin, but they leave the station. We learn that Erin made a call, because her phone records come in. She made a call to Deacon Mark, and as you all can see in this clip here we see Deacon Mark having his sermon, and I immediately I got these vibes for him. I'm like, he's maybe a potential suspect, especially after this conversation that the deacon has with Father Dan regarding if Deacon Mark knew or interacted with Erin, and he was just like, no, I haven't really talked to her since last summer, or whatever the case would be. I'm just like, there's something going on there with Erin, as well as this new deacon character here. He's maybe a potential victim, even with the reveal of Frank. Cut to Deacon Mark was on my radar, and he's even more on my radar after this episode. So we cut to Mare and Colin paying a visit to Deacon Mark, and this is one of my favorite lines in the entire episode. As they say, we're going to interview, Colin says to Mare, we're going to interview him in the house of God, and Mare says, yep, it will make it harder for him to lie. I love the little line there. It's one of my favorites of this show so far. Cut to Mare asking him his questions, the questions about where his whereabouts were and where he wasn't there that night, but he did speak to Erin, and this is an interesting moment here, because you got to remember what he said his relationship was with Erin to Father Dan. He told Father Dan that he really didn't know her, that he didn't really hear from her much after their summer camp church thing or whatever. But he tells Mare the complete opposite, that they had, and mind you, the words that he used here, he first said that they had a relationship, and then he corrects himself and said we had a friendship. And even Colin says relationship, or he didn't say it, but he has this look when he said the word relationship instead of a friendship. It's something to keep in mind with Erin. Now, obviously, she's not able to defend herself because she's dead, but relationship with Frank, relationship with the deacon, it's really interesting to know a little bit more. I hope we get like a flashback of Erin, or just really kind of saying who Erin really was. Again, It's great they picked Casey Spanning because she has that look. She has that innocent look. I don't know if you all saw Bad Times at the El Royale and her character in that show, and even a show like Devs last year, or that movie I should say, with Bad Times at the El Royale and the show Devs. She's perfect casting because she looks innocent and she looks, like a good person on the outside. But hey, we'll learn more about Erin in the weeks to come. But again, I thought it was very interesting that he used the word relationship versus using the word friendship. But nonetheless, he goes into him attempting to say that he didn't feel like it was weird that they were alone together, that he wanted to help her out, and he's doing God's will. And we see Mare poking fun of him, and even Colin having a good laugh at her poking fun of him. But again, it's really important to note that Mare says, why didn't you call us after you found out that she died and you were one of the last people she spoke to? Great question, Mare. Really great question. But nonetheless, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, we see that they leave and he's still on their radar, but he looks at them. He has this look on him like, oh snap, they're on to me. And we'll talk about what Deacon Mark does in this episode, but we see, Father Dan say, is everything okay? And he said, yeah, everything's fine. And we know it is not fine, Deacon Mark. But cut to us seeing this a little bit of levity. I love that the show can mixture in the drama, the bleakness, the kind of, all the stuff that's going on with the murder. But then they can throw in some levity, some little jokes here and there, as we see Mare going on a date with Richard, who Richard's someone still to keep an eye out for. But I love this moment between Helen meeting Richard and, the whole parent embarrassing their kid. Even though that Mare's a grown-ass adult, she's a grandmother, we can still see Helen poking fun of her kid in this moment. So I love that the show throws in those little moments there of levity. Cut to Siobhan. Now, this moment here, she's at the radio station with her band. Her girlfriend, Becca, throws up because she's, was high on edibles or whatever. That moment to me was a little bit misplaced in regards to, I don't know what the show is getting at, and we'll talk a little bit about later regarding her and this relationship with Ann. But we see that she has this girl that's flirting with her. I don't know what to make of it other than just character development and like a subplot and revolving around Ann and revolving around Siobhan. But I thought it was just kind of odd. But let me know your thoughts on Siobhan and this new girl that has an attraction to her and Ann. Let me know your thoughts on that. But cut back to Mare and Richard on their date. They're having a conversation. We get some interesting character backstory with Richard. He has a son that he really wasn't a part of his life for the beginning of his life because he was worried about sleeping with women in his books. But he kind of has regret. Now they have a little bit, it seems like they have a better relationship. But we also learn a little bit about Mare. We learned that she was a daddy's girl. Her dad was her best friend. He, unfortunately, this is the first time I think we've heard of this in the season. He died when she was 13, and she wanted to follow in his footsteps. If he was going to be a cop, she wanted to be a cop. If he was going to be, a stripper or a cook at a restaurant, she was going to follow behind his footsteps. So her dad really meant a lot to her, but he did pass away when she was 13. And then we see Richard giving her some advice, which kind of pushes the narrative forward in regards to do whatever it takes to protect your grandson regarding Carrie, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Back to Siobhan. Siobhan getting her purse from the Ann girl. She invites her to go out on a date. She initially says no, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But again, outside of just like a small subplot, a character subplot, character development, I don't really know the significance of Ann and her now having this potential relationship with Siobhan, and Siobhan maybe kicking Becca to the side, who seems to be, on drugs and really not, they don't seem to be on the same page. So let me know your thoughts on Siobhan and Ann's relationship and what we can look forward to with their relationship. Cut to Mare finding Erin's missing finger, and I love this moment because it's like Sherlock Holmes. I love the cop evidence, crime scene situation. They believe that it must have been, Erin was picked up in a car because of the distance from when they found her body to where they have this new crime scene on the bridge. And then we get into, like I said, this detective mode. And something also I want to point out, I mentioned it last week that I assumed that Colin was maybe a little bit more of a intuitive and pays attention to all the details type of detective. But no, the tables have turned. Mare is definitely the seasoned detective. She's calling things out, and Colin's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's really interesting to see this dynamic where, like I said, I thought Colin was going to be the more kind of stick to the book, playing by the rules type of detective and know everything. But no, it's Mare. She's showing you that she has the capabilities to figuring out this case that she gets taken from, and we'll talk about that at the end. But she does say, Colin, hey, bring in the dogs. You work for the county. We don't have dogs out here. So he makes that call. We see Mare is not giving up easily. She's been at the park for 5 hours now. It's freezing cold, but it pays off. She finds the ricochet of the bullet. She finds the bullet in the tree. And of course, that's something that they didn't really reveal in this episode. But when she finds that bullet, she sends it to the forensics team. What are we going to find out with that bullet? Can't wait to find that out, hopefully in next week. Cut to Dylan being told the good news that it seems like he's going to be able to walk again, but he has a conversation about his dad, about Dylan and not being the dad of, Erin's child. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But this is a really interesting moment. We cut to this kind of neighboring event, and all the neighbors gathering together, and we catch up with the older woman that we met in episode 1. I believe her name is Betty, and she has something interesting to say to Helen. She mentions that she feels suspicious of, I believe her name was Kathy's son. I don't think they gave the character a name yet, but she believes he's a weirdo. Is that someone we should put on our radar, this peeping Tom that we haven't heard about since we saw Betty in episode 1? Let me know your thoughts. Again, I don't know if they mentioned his who he's related to. They just said Kathy's son. I don't know who Kathy is. So, new suspect to keep an eye out for. Nonetheless, we see John confirms with Mare that, he does have an alibi for Frank, that they were together during that time where they suspect that Erin was killed. So, their stories line up. We see Colin informs Mare about the deacon in regards to he was transferred from one church to another, but the details of why he transferred haven't been given out. So, of course, they pay a visit to him. He doesn't answer the door, but he's looking out the window. Deacon Mark has some skeleton in his closet. Cut back to Dylan as he wants his son to lay on his lap, even though it's not advised to do so. And we see him looking at his son. And I took that moment as him really now thinking, maybe I'm not the dad of this little boy. But we get a little bit of more levity in the episode as we see Betty has a message left on her backyard from what she suspects as her neighbor. But this is a pretty big moment because we see Mr. Carl has fixed this security camera. And I say this is a big moment because we see Mare deletes the footage. Now, there's many ways to look at this, and let's break it down here. Number one, we can see this as just like a funny, innocent Mare doesn't want to deal with Betty because she has all these crazy things she wants her to do, and we know that from episode 1. She just doesn't want to deal with her. So sure, is that aspect of it. But there's also the aspect of Mare deleting the footage to show this kid doing, messing up their property, right? I can't think of the word right now. It's not coming to my mind, but vandalizing. He's vandalizing their property. So that's something that speaks to Mare's moral. Why would she delete that footage that can show that this kid did that? Which opens the door to Mare covering up for other people. I don't know, Frank, Siobhan, people that mean something to her. So that speaks a lot to Mare, and we'll talk about Mare doing something else a little bit later in this episode, but I thought that was maybe some foreshadowing for Mare's moral compass, but also it's important to note that she deleted that footage, which also could allude to her not paying attention to Betty, calling out this kid who's vandalized her property, but also she believes that kid's a weirdo. He can also be attached to Katie, missing a year ago, also attached to Erin, so it could be foreshadowing that Mare's not paying attention to the details, that she's pushing off this evidence and this new suspect and just thinking that it's nothing to care about. So a lot of things to kind of break down in Mare deleting that footage and how important it could be in foreshadowing for that kid whose name is unknown. Let me know in the comments, but something I definitely want to take note of. So moving on, we see Mare pays a visit to Carrie, and they have their little conversation that goes a little bit nicely at first, but then they go for the blows. We see Mare saying that she's crazy, she's not gonna get the kids, she talks to people that aren't really there. Carrie cuts even deeper and said, "You are a terrible mom. Kevin hated you, and he would hate to know that you are raising our son because you're a terrible mom." So not a good conversation between those two, and we see what that conversation leads to. Colin and Mare narrow down that they think it's between Dylan and Kenny in regards to being attached to the murder, but then Colin says, why would he admit to killing or think that he killed Dylan and not admit to killing his daughter? And I think this is an interesting line of dialogue by Mare. She says, it was really interesting when you'll be surprised at people, what they will confess and what they won't confess to. I don't know, that's Mare calling the kettle black in that moment for me, but they bring in that Dylan and maybe Brienne had something to do with covering up with this murder, and they want to question Deacon a little bit more because he's not off their radar. But we see Mare ask Colin, how did you figure it out, that 10-year-old girl that was missing? He goes into the whole thing like he became obsessed with it. He wanted to crack the case, and he brings up an interesting point. He says that, I overlooked the details. It was the neighbor the whole time, which goes back to my conversation about the neighbor and Betty calling out that kid. I don't know if that's just a little bit too on the nose there regarding the neighbor. Might be be the suspect, the main suspect the whole time. Mare goes to the evidence locker. She takes the drugs, which I'm thinking in my head, maybe she's taking the drugs just to kind of decompress, maybe get her mind off things. But no, we learn what she does with that drugs a little bit later, which again questions her morals, what she's willing to do to take care of her family, to cover up for her family, to make sure that her grandson's in her, custody, to make sure that her ex-husband is safe, her daughter is safe. I don't know. We'll talk about that at the end. But cut to Siobhan, again, continuing to work on the project with her brother, as she says that, when her brother died 2 days ago, it was like a day or so that she didn't speak to him, and he went to the beach, and she doesn't know who was on the beach with him before he took his own life. But she cuts and looks at the sweatshirt that Ann gave her, and she agrees to go on the date with her. So again, just going back to Siobhan, this project that she's working on with her brother, there's a lot of details to say about that, how she maybe feels about her mom. Maybe her mom, Mare, was the last person that he spoke to on the beach, but also just the idea of her diving into this case and her protecting her family, her protecting her dad, who might be someone involved with the father of Erin's child. So there's something to say about Siobhan protecting her dad, Mare protecting her daughter and her ex-husband. There's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of stuff I'm looking forward to figuring out. But cut to Mare going to the bar, which the only criticism I really have about this episode was, I'm not going to lie, I love Evan Peters, but him pretending to be drunk or acting drunk was not that good to me. And when anyone plays drunk in movies and shows, it's always kind of like, this feels kind of awkward. But nonetheless, he reveals that he had a fiance that left him, and they have like a bonding moment. She apologizes for her son's death and him taking his own life. But we also get this moment where, I don't know, was it me or Colin was kind of hitting on Mare in that scene? I don't know. I might be looking much into it, but I think he does have maybe some type of attraction towards Mare. But we see Mare looking at the drugs that she took, and we know what she's going to do with that a little bit later. But before we get to that, we got a big moment. We cut to Deacon Mark tossing Erin's bike into the river, ladies and gentlemen. So Deacon Mark has her bike. Doesn't mean he's a killer. It just means that he has something that he knows might not look good on his side, or it could be The Undoing all over again. I don't want to spoil The Undoing for all those people out there that haven't seen it. Great show, but it was in our face the whole time. So I don't know. Maybe Deacon Mark is the actual killer, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to be that easy, ladies and gentlemen. But a very important scene, him tossing that bike in the river. Like, I don't know. He acts like the river is just like the ocean. It could still be found, but we'll see what comes of that. And maybe someone saw him throwing that into the river. But as we wrap up the episode, this is a big moment here. Cut to the next moment. The next morning, Chief Carter wants to talk to Mare. He brings her outside. He says, listen, pulled over. There were drugs found in her car. And I know those drugs. They were in our evidence locker, which went missing yesterday. I know it was you, Mare, and I want to get you off the force. I want to take away your badge, but I want to do you this favor because I know you're going through a lot. I'm going to put you on a leave and give me your gun and your badge. She's no longer on the case. Even if you have the itch to go on this case, don't do it, Mare. He kicks her off the case. He calls her out for the stuff that she just did to plant the drugs on Carrie. That, ladies and gentlemen, speaks a lot about Mare yet again, what she's willing to do. I mean, that is a huge thing because number one, Carrie's going to go to jail, right? Or at least to the minimum. She's going to be in rehab. She's going to go through all that again. She's not going to be fit to be the mom. She's never going to be able to have custody of her kids. So that says a lot about what Mare is willing to do to keep her grandson, Drew, in her possession. So that speaks again to my theory about covering up for Siobhan. Siobhan carrying up for her dad. Vice versa with Mare covering up for Frank potentially. And maybe knowing more than what she's leading on to Lori. So it speaks a lot about Mare getting those drugs, planting on Carrie, deleting that footage, ignoring evidence to maybe finding someone else that has to do with these murders, also deleting evidence because she doesn't want to deal with Betty. It speaks a lot about that character. Phenomenal episode. Things are heating up with Deacon Mark, and what an incredible episode, to say the least, because now she's not on the case. She can't be involved in the case. We know Mare's going to find her way back in the case, but a lot of great stuff within this moment. So let's talk about it. I want to play a little game. I'm going to probably do this every review, but let's play a game. Name your suspect. So I'm going to name my number one. I'm going to rank my suspects here, starting off with, obviously, Deacon Mark. I mean, all the evidence points towards him lying about not having a relationship with Erin, having that bike, obviously. Why was he transferred from one church to another? So right now, he's looking like my number one. Number two is Betty's neighbor. I don't know that kid's name, but I mean, yeah, he seems suspicious. I mean, him, vandalizing her backyard. Very first episode, remember what she said about her granddaughter? Someone was lurking outside. Was it him looking in the window? It doesn't mean he's a killer. He could just be a creep, you know, a perv or whatever the case may be, but who knows? He's my number 2. Then I'm going to kind of bunch it all up into here. These are my kind of all tied into 3, A, B, and C. Kenny, Dylan, and Brienne. We obviously know Kenny has this whole thing with maybe he was upset about just getting drunk and him having an argument with his daughter. He didn't seem to be that good of a dad. Dylan and Brienne, it kind of makes sense. You know, I'm not happy in this relationship. I maybe want to have full custody of my son. Brienne hates her as it is, so maybe she's willing to do what it takes to make sure that his ex-girlfriend's out of the picture. Might be stretching there, but then I definitely want to throw these 3 into the bunch. Siobhan, Frank, and Faye. Siobhan wants to protect her family. She wants to keep her family safe. She's lost her brother. She doesn't want her family to break up anymore, so it makes sense she will cover up for Frank, who might not be the murderer, but might be the baby daddy. But he could have, I don't know, he was drunk that night at 2:30. John was there covering up for his best friend. And then Faye, she might not have killed anyone, but if she did kill her, it would make sense. You know, I'm trying to have this new life with my husband. You know, are the mother of his child. I told you to stay away from my future husband. I don't know, but she might not have been the killer, but she's covering something up. And then just kind of my wild card characters here. Richard, we can't forget about Guy Pearce's character. He just comes into town, and now this girl's all of a sudden missing, and he has this whole backstory that he gave us in this episode. Keep my eye on Richard. And last but not least, this is my wild card pick of the week. What about Mare? I mean, I don't know if she would have... I can't think of the reasons why she would kill Erin outside of protecting her family, protecting Frank of not revealing the father. Maybe she said, I'm going to come out and tell people the truth and, you know, covering up. She did a lot of covering up in this episode. But I really don't know what else, why she would kill Erin besides, you know, like I just mentioned. And then again, was she responsible for her son taking her own life? Maybe it was something she said to him. And again, she looks at taking care of Drew as like this second chance, but that's a wild card. We'll see about Mare, but that's my list. Let me know your list of suspects, 1 through 8, 1 through 5. Let me know your wild card picks. Let me know your thoughts on keep saying doctor, but Deacon Mark. Let me know your thoughts on, you know, your pros and cons of this episode, and of course what you hope to see in the weeks ahead. We still got that bullet to investigate. We still got the bike missing in the river, and so many more suspects that might come to the table. So 30 plus minutes. I love this show. I love talking about this show with you all. Again, thank you for sticking around to the end if you did so. Again, I hope the time codes were helpful for you, but go ahead and light up those comments, guys. Make sure to like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my other reviews for this show, other shows I'm covering, other movie reviews that we have, live streams that we do on this channel. Thank you guys for the continued support. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.